takes a little while for the thing to spin. Okay. So this is the second time, well, sort of the third time, because we're doing the same thing twice each time that we do it. Once trying to hit people that like to get up in the morning in Europe, and sort of the more far away groups that are here, and then we do it again in the evening for the European market. And it's affectionately known on mine and Matt's sort of planning document as the coffee slot and the wine slot, or the beer slot, depending on what sort of state we're in. Just to say, this is nothing from the IB. This is just me and Matt thinking this is a good idea to share some stuff and to share what we think and we know and all that sort of stuff. So we're not here to sort of talk about official IB stuff or stuff that's coming from the IB. I mean, there's lots of questions knocking around about what should we do about IAs for next year and all that sort of stuff. My advice at this point would be to do nothing and wait as long as you can to make any decision. And I don't think the IB are going to make any statements about next year yet until they've sorted out the mess that is this year. And also, they've got the November. The first thing they're going to do is release any information about the November paper, not about what we need to be doing next summer and things like that. So in terms of planning your IAs, my advice is just to get done with your students as much other stuff as you can possibly do at the minute. So for example, my school, we are pushing heavily on the extended essays. Sort of, right, let's use this time to get that done. And I'm even pushing the geographers a little bit harder than the official school deadline, just to try to get most of things done. So we're in Google Meet, which is it's a change from some of you are Zooming or Microsoft Teaming or all that sort of stuff. And there is a chat box if you click up at the top. Can I ask you to find that and drop into there just where you are joining us from today? That would be great. Just so we get an idea of where we're all from or where we are currently sitting. Not like in the bedroom, but wherever. Vietnam, Australia, Singapore, France, Qatar, India, Belgium, Oxford. Excellent, thank you for that. If you haven't done that, just do that for a second. We'll So the sort of general sort of format of this sort of thing is that me and Matt are both going to talk about some bits we've been working on recently. Then we're both going to talk about some bits that we've found recently, which we're finding super useful to what we're doing. And then we're both going to sort of talk about some bigger things. And the general theme for today was infographics, but we're also going to look at prepping or things that can be done to help prep, or themes from IGCSE into IB, because lots of people are now sitting with IGCSE classes who have finished, and this idea of maybe helping them prep up to, or not prep, doing a pre-GCSE couple of months without calling it a a pre-IB couple of months without calling it as such. So I'm just going to share my screen just to show you what I've been doing, and then I'll hand over to Matt. Where's the present button? Here we go. So here in France, well, I live in France but teach in Switzerland. So here in Switzerland, we've been out now since when was it? Sort of late March. So we're not doing as many weeks as some of you have done. But what I'm basically trying to do is I design geography all the way. So I teach with it on the screen while I'm in the room. It's never been sort of designed as a remote learning tool, though some people find it useful for that. So what I have been doing is changing the structure and adding content to the lessons as I teach them, so that there are more independent tasks, etc. So for example, and what I do, as soon as I do that, I add them to this page, which is linked to from the front page of Geography All the Way. So these are the ones that I've taught recently, and therefore I've really tried to structure them with a little bit more of a 5-minute, 10-minute introduction via, well, we use Meet, and then a crack on with whatever you want. Here's the lesson, get on with it. But I always require, I'll just drop the link into the chat. I always require the stuff to I always ask students to hand in the work at the end. I use Google Classroom for that. And I don't necessarily go through and mark all their notes, but it's a good way of reviewing my lessons, but also a good way of seeing where there's gaps and things like that. So I just thought I'd point those out just in case people are finding them useful. And obviously it's only really useful if you happen to be teaching a similar part of the course as I do at the minute. And I'm at the minute thrashing through the end of Unit 1 and sort of midway through Unit 4. What else was I was going to show you one other thing before I hand over, and that was the wonder that is Flipboard. Now I know people have been hanging around and using Flipboard for a long time, but I think with our students not being present, I think again it's worth going back to it. Flipboard is an amazing tool, and I've been banging on about it at workshops for years now, as a way of producing curating a bespoke magazine for your students. So what you do is you flip in. So there's a little, if you see my window in my seat, I'm presenting my Google Chrome window at the minute, and at the top there's this little emblem, this little flip it one. When I find something useful, I hit the flip it button and I can decide which of my magazines that I put it into. Now, what we've tried to do over time is have a Flipboard magazine for each of the sections of the IB geography course, and there is other teachers out there as well as myself flipping stuff in. Ronan, who teaches up in the mountains in Switzerland, does quite a bit. Charlotte has put stuff in from Belgium and stuff. So what you've got is a nicely curated already source of stuff that's relevant for IB geography. What I also can see or notice is that teachers then flip stuff out of those magazines into their own ones, like Mr. Podbury's class for Year 8 class. So it's even sort of more space. You can put video in there, you can put all sorts of stuff in. So if you haven't explored it and you've got a bit of time now, it's worth looking at. It works fantastic on tablets, but it also works brilliantly on the browser now as well. So it's definitely worth having a look round, because we do always regularly ask our students to read more of the news. That's a little bit wide and open at the minute. So therefore, using this is just a little bit more focused. I have tried to make a magazine recently, and it's going all right, where I'm trying to flip more geographical lessons. More geographical lessons about, sorry, one of those days, when I have a glass of water, sip of water. More geographical focused articles about COVID. So the idea is, there's lots and lots written about COVID at the minute, but trying to get the ones which I feel that are more useful, or the geography is clear in them, and sort of jumping out some more. So there you go. What me and Matt do at the end of these webinars is put a web page together of all the links we've used. So please go and find those. We'll drop the links into the Facebook. So we've got a quick question there. So really quick to flip from smart. So there's lots of ways to flip your content in. So geography all the way stuff that I'm making for remote learning, and these are definitely the bits I'm working on quite a bit at the minute. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then Matt is going to dive in, hopefully.
Are we good?
I think you're all good, Matthew.
Okay, cool. So again, with me, I'm sort of preparing for taking my grade 10s, or you might call them year 11s, back. They're going to be starting school again next week, and that's one of the reasons actually that when we were organising our next webinar, that it's not going to be able to be on a Monday, because this is normally when I would teach my grade 12s or year 13s, but they're going to use this time slot for me to teach my grade 10s some skills, not called IB, anything to do with IB, but basically the stuff that I shared with you last time that Paul over in Brazil had put together is the kind of going to be the focus of what I'm doing. So I've been sort of putting my own bits and pieces together with that, and I'll put those on there. So other than you know, grade 12s or year 13s being out of the picture, it's been mostly me working on, just put this on here. Yeah, mostly me working on resourcing. This called last lesson, it's pretend geography as Rich calls it, but it's my alternative to option G this year, due to my field work in Barcelona, which may or may not be going ahead. And so it's I've been sort of busy resourcing the first 3 units of this, and the fourth one is sort of underway. The second and third one, which are the new ones, are free to access, and I don't put those behind any sort of paywall really until I've actually been through, taught them, and worked out that they actually work, and I've tweaked them and whatever else. So yeah, the sort of first section about tourism hotspots, I've been putting some stuff together there, looking at essentially Venice, which is quite a nice one to do, because of the kind of cruise ship issues that have raised their head recently. So in terms of the urban one, I've looked at that, and then in terms of the physical one, I quite like using Machu Picchu. And again, there's been lots of developments around that particular area in the last 5 or 6 years to try to sort of limit the number of tourists that go there too. So sort of one place that's fairly close-ish to us is in Venice, and a lot of the students tend to have been there in Machu Picchu. It's kind of on the bucket list. It's on all those kind of cool places that you should go videos, and yeah, I'm hoping to use those as well. The sports league thing, I'm sticking with a kind of local one that we use here, mostly because there's a pretty big domination by 2 teams, and that works really nicely for sphere of influence. And then the festival one, I've only ever been to this festival once before, and it was amazingly a very nice year where it didn't get covered in mud. And I've put some stuff together here for the Glastonbury Festival, which is a rather large festival in the southwest of England that happens every year. It's a music festival. There's some mapping tasks, some comparison satellite imagery, all these sorts of things. So that was actually quite a nice one to put together. It sort of brought back some memories of my youth, and a rather nice few days spent with some friends down there. So that's kind of all completed. The third unit is sport and tourism and sport at the international scale. And again, what I've kind of gone with this, it's sort of, I asked on the Facebook group a while ago, you know, what are your main recommendations when resourcing option E? And a lot of people were saying, oh, you know, there's quite a lot of repetition in there. And it sort of occurred to me when I was looking through this, and I know some of you guys on here were with us in Iceland last June, I think it was. And just from going there and picking up resources and listening to the lectures and listening to what people were saying there, it suddenly occurred to me that actually I can hit most of the content in this section about niche tourism strategies, the role of TNCs, and then the cost and benefits of tourism as a national development strategy. I could hit that essentially using one country. And I kind of double checked this as well in terms of development strategy, because often I used to use the Gambia, but because of the financial situation in Iceland back in 2008, the fact that they kind of went bust, the government got sacked, and they had to pretty much start from scratch again, and they've used tourism as an avenue into that. And interestingly, links in with the sort of major volcanic eruption in 2010, which put Iceland firmly back on the map. And then kind of Reykjavik being this halfway point with Iceland Air. So if you travel from the States or North America to Europe, these amazingly cheap fares, as long as you've spent 24 hours in Reykjavik on the way across. And kind of it just works particularly well. So yeah, I've got about 2/3 of the way through that. Again, I'm using some models that I haven't used before. And there's a really good geography teacher, he's retired now, called Paul Berry. And I'll put links onto his blog. And he did this kind of really cool piece of write-up looking at the Butler model, which is the thing that we're going to be testing on RIA if it goes to plan. But then also this work on Doxy's irritation index, or the Iridex, which I must say I'd never looked at on the previous incarnation of this qualification. So yeah, I've kind of popped quite a lot in there to do with that as well, and applied that to Iceland. to the Golden Circle, if you know about that, and to how things even like Justin Bieber and him filming music videos in that country has caused some significant problems with the fans trying to find where this place was and recreate it. So yeah, I'm sort of, again, that's free to access, but it's not quite finished, but it should. I'm hoping all 4 units will be completed and done by the next time that we meet up. And I could, and anytime you've got feedback, if you could just get back in contact with me, that would be great. So yeah, apart from planning grade 10, I have been essentially working on, trying to finish off the option E, sport, leisure and tourism, and giving myself some pretty good souvenir reminders of our amazing trip to Iceland last year, which was pretty cool. So that's where I'm up to, Rich.
Okay, so the next bit is we sort of try to share some of the cool bits and bats that we've found recently and that we're enjoying using or think there's huge potential. So I think it was actually in this in the webinar 3 weeks ago that somebody mentioned something to me, and what then happened was I spend a lot of time, my other half of my job is all about tech, and I sort of have a rule, I need to hear from 3 different people before I bother to go and look at it, because there's just lots going on. But somebody started talking about Kalo. Is it Kalo? How would you say it? K-I-A-L-O, something like that, Kalo. And there's a Kalo Edu version as well. And what it is basically an online debating forum. And I just feel that this has got huge potential for higher level. I think it's got huge potential for helping pick apart the 16-mark questions for revision. And what I've got here is 3 examples that I tried with my departing year 13s last week. So the whole idea is that you make a thesis statement, and that you can see what my students have done here. I'll just remove some of their names. And the whole idea is you give them the thesis statement. So I gave them contemporary pandemic death rates are primarily provoked by, I need to put my false teeth in today, by social geography. So then it's all about making claims. Now this was really, really good for them, because we had to work first of all on what a claim was, this idea of it. And this system works really well if they're short, if it's a sentence, and I want their claims to have a location or a data point in exactly the same way as I would want them to do if they were doing an exam, okay? And then they can post their claims either for or against, so this is pros and cons. And then what you can also have is claims upon the claims, which is quite nice. You can have a voting upon claims. So if you feel that a claim is good, you can give it more of a vote. So there's a strength going on with those, which is quite nice as well. I quite like that feature. You can also give, if you use the Edu version, you can also go in as a teacher and give teacher feedback upon the claims. So you can actually pull a claim back and say, right, there's not enough evidence in there, or you can move a claim from the pros to the cons. Now, because it's online, you can go back and revisit it. And you can set it up in a way that it doesn't just have to be your students. My students, I think it'd be really good for them if we could get something going here where we had several schools using the same one. I've just got this vision where if we had several schools and other people making claims against their claims, it would be a really good way of getting them to think and provoke them. So I think there's a really good possibilities there. I also think there's a great possibility in terms of being able to, I almost want to start without the technology. I want to start with this written on the board, and I want to start with this idea of post-it notes being the different claims, and then pushing them on to make sure their claims have got enough detail in it and all that sort of stuff, and then talking about which sides of the argument and things, and before we start to look at this online option for it. But I do think this has got some super opportunities for our students. It's free. It's pretty easy to set up, and you make teams to invite a class in. There's ways they can do that just by a link. So actually the high techness isn't particularly good. It seems to be all GDPR compliant and all that sort of stuff. So go and have a look at that. This is, you know, definitely my big thumbs up. What I did was I did 3 lessons about the geography of COVID with them. And for each, I put a page. I've got 3 thesis statements, and 1 was per lesson. And for each one, I tried to give a set of resources. So if we go to the contemporary pandemic one you've just been looking at, I tried to give them some videos, I tried to give them some visualizations, and I tried to give them something to read and listen to. So it was very much, the lesson was along the lines of, get yourself in there, you've got half an hour, go and read something, listen to something, look at something. I don't really mind what you do as long as you do one of them. And then I got them to come back in with some claims written down, and we had some reading out of those, and we polished those a little bit before I pushed them over to the platform to start sort of playing with that. So just a big heads up from me, that I think this has got a huge potential that can be used. And I'd be interested if other people are playing with that, and if anybody wants to sort of team up with other things to get going in terms of other classes, especially think when a revision time comes along as well. Let me just see if there's any comments in there. Cool, yeah, we'll pick up on some of those. Cool. Has anybody got digital that can track Harkness debates? Okay, right, I'll have a look at those. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass over to Matt for what he's some cool bits and bats that he's found.
Can you hear me okay? Perfect. Okay. So I'll just stick on to presenter mode. Give me a second. Okay, guys. So a couple of things that I really enjoyed doing, or I'm looking forward to, was that it must have been last Tuesday, I think, or Wednesday. There was a really good free online webinar by a company called Seneca. They're just down here in the bottom of this. I've heard of them before, but I've never actually used them or sort of bought anything that they've done. But the person that was presenting on this is a fellow geography teacher called Kate Stockings, who's based in London. And although this is kind of an IB geography seminar, she did this really brilliant 50-minute presentation on how to design a great Key Stage 3 curriculum. A lot of the stuff that she talked about is absolutely transferable through to IGCSE and to IB. And although she designs her curriculum to fit in with the national curriculum, it gave me quite a lot to think about in terms of actually choosing what we should do and where we should look at IB. And the one thing that really shone through is that she has read so much around geography teaching, and I've just sort of paused the video that you can see there at the point where she sort of had these sort of key books that she thought would be the best ones to read. Now, it was just great, and she's got a huge amount to share. She's kind of a bit of an up and coming star, I think, in the geography world, and the stuff that she produces, I think, is absolutely excellent. What I'll do is I'll put the link, the YouTube link to her talk, which is now being recorded and uploaded to YouTube. And if you've got a spare sort of 50 minutes at any point to have a little listen to that, it is absolutely fantastic. And it's one of the things I'm trying to do at the moment, lower down the school, is to rationalize what I'm doing, to look again at what I do with my grades 6, 7, and 8, or year 7, 8, and 9, you might call them, and try to plot a clearer course through and look quite carefully at what I'm going to do. So one thing I've done is I've gone to Alan Parkinson who I mentioned last time, has the Living Geography blog spot. And I've asked him for a copy of his Key Stage 3 curriculum handbook, which I think is pretty amazing. And I'm going to use what Kate has said on hers and what Alan's given me and anything else that I can beg, steal and borrow to try to rationalise what I do, and to make sure that in our school they always say make sure everything leads up until the IB. We don't do MYP, although we do PYP. So I'm kind of mindful of that, really. So Kate Stocking's brilliant 50-minute video, pretty much for any geography teacher out there. I would really highly recommend it. The second thing to draw your attention to, and I noticed, I think Gemma mentioned it before, is that there's this really good looking webinar coming up tomorrow at 4 p.m. British time, which is not so great for most of you guys. It's a repeat of something that was done at the GA conference a week or so ago. And the slides are already on the GA website. Again, I'll get the link to those and put them on there. This is my case study or detailed example, whatever you want to call it, at IB for option D, geophysical. But the interesting thing about it is kind of what Bob Digby, who's the old president of the GA, says underneath, which is kind of the neglected impacts, such as impacts upon human health. So if you do that particular option, or the economic shift into farming as well. But it looks to be, and from having looked at the slide, it looks to be a really, really good presentation by an ex-teacher, someone who knows the area particularly well. And if you get a chance to either tune in, that's probably going to be in the middle of the night for you guys. So at least perhaps catch up with it afterwards. And again, I'll see if I can get hold of the links to it and post them. But that looks particularly good. Unfortunately, it falls right in the middle of our after school meeting, which goes between 4:30 and 5:30. So I'm not quite sure what to do, really. I might have one on one screen and the other on the other screen, and just carefully make sure that I'm concentrating on both. But yeah, I've got a bit of a dilemma with that one, but we'll see. The other thing to mention here as well is that some of you guys will have seen this. I think Rich posted it on the Facebook page, is that we've got a notice from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that they're doing these webinars for 13 to 18-year-olds. So probably very useful if you've got any grade 10s or year 11s like me who are meant to be doing something to keep up and they're quite motivated. Would certainly be a good thing to do. I'm going to post this with a big, I think you should do this, to my grade 11s. Although we've already done the circular economy, it's something that they find quite difficult, I think, to grasp, given the amount of curriculum time that it takes. It's only mentioned really once, although you could mention it a lot more in a huge number of the different topics that we do. The one thing I've been after, really, and we sort of sat down with the business studies teacher and our DT teacher, design technology teacher, is, you know, could we do a school project that has circular economy implications? And I've tried, and maybe not for the last 6 months, but I've tried really hard to find examples of schools that have put into place a circular economy type project that's affordable. And I did see one example of a school that had done something, but the cost of the equipment to set up was about $20,000. So our school are definitely not going to do that. So again, it'd be a really nice way, I think, of giving those students that kind of extra dimension to this. And again, I'll post the link onto this as well, but well worth it, I think, for grade 10s or year 11s, grade 11s or year 12s to be getting stuck into. So yeah, essentially Kate Stockings, the webinar tomorrow, and the circular economy webinars specifically aimed at the students, I think would be a particularly useful thing for them to look at. Rich, over to you.
So we sort of tried to give each of these webinars or vague theme, and there was a lot of requests about thinking about infographics. So I'm just going to try to spend the next 10 minutes or so talking about that. So if I just present my screen at the minute, so this is the page on, and I've just dropped a link into the chat. This is the Geography All the Way page on infographics. And I've actually been putting a bit of polish on it this morning, or adding some other bits to it. And I just want to chat through some of the bits about it. And then I've got a bit of presentation that I want to sort of speak to as well. So as we're all aware, there's a 10 marks within paper 2, which are all focused on the infographics. And I'm not too bothered about the first 4 of those 10 marks. Those first 4 are interpretation type stuff. What is this value? Something like that. That's not my major worry. The 6 marks are, and I'll come to that in a minute. What you'll see here on Geography All the Way is I've got my top, what, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, top 7 sources of infographics. Visual Capitalist has really come into its own over the last sort of 6 months or so as being an amazing source of all sorts of infographics. The next one down is from the UN. It's linked to the UN Environmental Agency, and it's basically all the infographics or all the graphics from UN reports, on UN environment reports, which have been pulled out and put in one place. If you go into there and type something like deserts or Arctic ice or glaciers or water cycle, you will find some brilliantly produced, crisp graphics and infographics that can be downloaded and used, you know, as you want. PDF versions as well, really quite sweet. Information is Beautiful is the original sort of infographic people. They have, well, Visual Capitalist and Information is Beautiful have Twitter streams which are worth following, and Instagram streams which are worth following, in terms, especially with Information is Beautiful, daily little examples of little infographics to use. The World Bank on Visually. Visually is a platform for infographics, and the World Bank are using it to host some of those. That's another source. The Humanitarian Information Units from the US government, and it's got a whole selection. And then United Nations Environmental Programme, and what they call the Environmental Data Explorer posters, are a really useful set of infographic type posters that if you're looking something for your classroom and you've got access to a large scale printer, get those printed off and get them on the walls. And I've also started a list of honourable mentions. I put a tweet out yesterday asking people, you know, for examples, and you know, a couple of people mentioned World Map. I think it was Dave Rogers that mentioned it. Yeah, I mean, I like the World Mapper stuff, but it's only really one style. It's on one style of infographic. There's more out there. Gapminder's got some good tools, and the Financial Times, Good, and Wired are also some other great sources. So leaving that, I've also put together 3 articles which I've come across recently. If you want to read about infographics, there's some quite useful stuff there. I quite like the one from The Economist, Mistakes. We've drawn a few, so that's quite cool. You've also got this, which was produced by the Financial Times, which is about visual vocabulary, terms to use and different graphs that can be used. That, again, if you can print it big, is worth exploring in terms of some of the language your students might want to use. And I think there's some good overlap here for extended essays and IAs as well. I've also linked or put into here 9 useful infographics. So if you are just desperate for an infographic, I've put one in there which I think is useful for each of the units. Now, okay, I understand that the infographics that our students are going to see is in paper 2. It's usually going to be based on stuff from global change, but there's no reason why you shouldn't be using infographics in the whole of the course, because there's use. So there's some suggestions for unit 4, 5, and 6 there, and as well as freshwater, food and health, and extreme environments. So there's just loads of stuff out there. I'm not going to speak about them now, but they're there. I've when before we had some past papers to actually use, I had a go at writing some infographic questions for some of our mocks. So if you want some infographic style questions to have a play with, there's three there that you can use and you can download. Yeah, you should be able to download those, and there's some teacher resources there. So that's what I've been putting together or polishing over the last couple of days. It's on the free page on Geography All the Way. Please help yourself to that and use it as much as you like. I also whipped together a little presentation. Can you? Oh, it's presenting full screen. I don't like that. How can I stop that? Let me just try something else, because they've tried something new. Let me just do present tab. What do I get if I do this? I do that, share, and then present that way. Can you see, does it say infographics? Can anybody give me a nod? It's okay, thank you very much, brilliant. Okay, so I'm just trying to put some stuff together here. I don't want to go into too much what infographics are, though it's all very trendy, and I think the IB geography team thought they were at the cutting edge of something by introducing them into the course. Brilliant, I quite like them. But the whole idea, and what I try to explain to my students, is the idea that it's a graph that a designer has got his hands on. And that designer is therefore sort of maybe skewing what we're seeing. And therefore, that designer is being paid by somebody to do that. So it's bringing in a lot of TOK, I think, in terms of not quite fake news, nothing that strong, but this idea of influence upon how we look at graphs. And it's also, there's a massive link here to the IAs when we talk and extended essays, when we talk to our students about how they design their data presentation. It's, there's an overlap here, there's a similarity. And there's so many ones out there. I mean, this is just one I think I pulled from, this is from the New Internationalist. This idea of trying to show data in lots of different ways. And what you've got here is something that could easily be picked apart as part of a class or as part of an introduction to a lesson on forced migration or something like that. But in terms of an approach to them, in terms of how we get our students to think about them, I don't think it's much different from how we get them to interpret a graph. And what we use at our school is we try to talk about what's oh so easy. And when they're looking at a graph or they're looking at a map, they're looking at something that's obvious, something that's specific, and something that's odd. And that's always something that I try to get them to, this works for our design question and describe questions. It's oh so easy. And they know that and they drill it into it. But actually what we're really looking for as IB geographers is we need someone to set up a website called poorlyproducedinfographics.com. Because actually what you get in the exams aren't true infographics. They're infographics that the IB art department have either simplified or tinkered with for the students. Now, there's a good reason for that. The exams are busy. We don't want anything too whizzy or just going to take too much time. But they're not what we are finding as sources out there. So if you remember the infographic that is shown on the infographic that is on the specimen, it's not, it came from good. Here's the original. It was edited down. It was simplified. If you look at the infographics that we've had in the most recent November paper and last summer's paper, they were almost even more simplified on top of that. So the 6-mark question, this is where kids or our students are stumbling. And these are what we've had already. These are the 3 questions that we've got to play with. We've got an evaluate, we've got to what extent does an infographic show a flawed representation, and we've got an evaluate question as well. So there's all those AO3s. Yeah, they're all AO3s. They're all really open. And what the advice that we are being given is, and what I've done is just gone back to the subject reports. I've had a look through, and I've tried to sort of distill what is in the subject reports down to a bit of advice. The first bit is to go beyond layout and color. That is really sort of low level of what they're looking at. Okay, we need to go deeper than that, and it's almost, if you're giving feedback to the students, that's nice, but there's more to play with. It's a real request to look at the geography being presented rather than the style of the presentation. How, there's still an element of the geography. It's not purely a sort of a media studies assessment of something that's being presented. They still need to be digging into the geography associated with what is being presented. There's some mentions in the subject reports about the idea of the language use. The students tend to focus on the colours or missing things like that, rather than maybe the language use of the headings and the legends and the keys and things like that. And to really dig into a question, there was the to what extent question. If you're doing it to what extent, there's positives and negatives. So what actually was the infographic doing well? We tend to go in and go negative. Actually, there's more to that. We can be thinking about the positive as well. And using all the information that is available in the resource. Now, okay, this isn't a magic wand that's going to help our students suddenly get 6s out of those possible 6s, but I think I'm going to take this in when I'm next doing infographics with my students. And I try to sprinkle them into the course. These are going to be some things I'm going to be thinking about, because I'm not going to be drilling them on the can you read this and get a data point from it, because if they can't do that by now, we're scuppered. This is the stuff. This is 6 mark there. Why do they like this infographic? What's this infographic doing for them? What's it not doing? What's missing? All those sort of bigger questions is going to be more useful. Now, some people are saying how they deal with it and approach it. I think this is a good opportunity to go and speak to your historians, because they like a little bit of this, apparently. They like this idea of an origin, purpose, content, value, and limitations. This is what your students have probably heard when they're doing source analysis as part of history lessons. And actually, when you're looking at an infographic, it's just a source. It's something to look at. So the idea of the origin, now, we don't get so much of that, I think, in terms of the information that we're being given as part of the exam. But maybe they might, for the ones you're showing them, it's a good way to look at it. Purpose, what's it produced, what's it trying to convey? Some idea of what we're seeing, content, so what's the source saying? And then you've got the limitations at the end. So this is it. This is one way of doing it. This is maybe something to drill them. Or you could go as simple as the 5 W's of what is it, why is it, who produced it, where was it produced, or what SKU was it, and when was it produced? At its most simple. But I do completely agree that it's a tricky thing to get into, to get this 6 mark question. We really need to be challenging them, maybe some sort of work where you're putting it on the center of a table, you're getting the kids in silence to really annotate all over these things, really to drill into them what they like, what they don't like, what's they're missing, what they could be talked about. I think there is, when I'm going into revision with my students, going to be looking at then having a go at writing the questions about it. I think that's a really good approach. What question could be asked? But we have currently a very, very small pool, i.e. we've got 3 questions that we've seen already on what could be done. I don't spend a great time on infographics. It's a little irregular. We look at them, we might spend 5-10 minutes looking at what we don't like about them, and then we move on. It's just a nice little sort of introduction to a lesson and things like that. So with the knowledge that Matt has only got 10 minutes before his little darlings will be wanting him back and listening to his wise words, I'm going to pass over to Matt to finish us off.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. So yes, essentially it's the infographics, the same as Rich, really. It's I mean, I certainly don't cover them in every lessons, but where the opportunity arises, I might stick one on a worksheet that has something to do with one of the units that we're looking at, and get them to do that little critique at the end, or set it as a homework once in a while. But I do have a series of them printed off in A3, and when we're doing especially the population, climate change, and the resources themes, they come out a fair bit, given that's the ones they're pretty much going to see. Like I say, feedback from last year was that the students didn't have many problems with the lower mark questions, but the 6, I think, is problematic. And I think the more examples we get, the more mark schemes we get to see. I think that might work out, kind of give us a sort of help us plot a path through, I think, a little more clearly. I'm just going to sort of quickly deal with a question by Kylie from last time, which are about the important themes and topics from IGCSE and NYP that students should know before embarking on IB. I think, I mean, as I said before, we're not an NYP school. I would imagine the links there are far more explicit than with something that's non-IB accredited like IGCSE. IGCSE, I find a good preparation qualification for IB in terms of being able to complete all the work, and it's certainly, you can't be work shy when it comes to doing IGCSE. It's not the greatest, I don't think, for students who have language issues or learning difficulties because of the content, and there is no differentiated outcome for them. But having said that, there are some sort of foundations that are laid there, particularly population and settlement, which are massive units that come up to begin with. Obviously, the population then comes back in the population part of the standard level unit. Settlement would rear its head again in option G. Natural environments, there's a nice little look at all sorts of things there, notably tectonics, rivers for option A, tectonics option D, coast option B, and weather and climate, so elements of option C. And then economic development is probably the most out-of-date unit, and it has been out of date for many years. You've got some stuff in there on agricultural systems, so food and health. Global tourism, so option E. Energy systems, obviously global change, unit 3. The big thing about IGCSE is what I sort of call it box learning, is that there's no synthesis required particularly. It's each unit is taught on its own. There is no expectation the students link that to any other unit. So it's kind of up to you to do that in the class, and really to make those links. Although at the same time explaining that it's not going to be necessary to do that in the exam and on the mark scheme, because they actually would run the risk of straying away from what the question is asking. Sustainability, I don't think IGCSE does a particularly good job of that. There's nothing in there on sustainable development goals, which you would imagine would underpin any geography qualification worth its sort of salt at the moment. So, you know, this new qualification they released a couple of years ago isn't really new, but I think you just have to sort of consciously add these things in where possible. And then the big challenge, I think, for students and teachers who have IGCSE into IB is to spend those quality 2 or 3 weeks at the beginning of the IB course introducing synthesis, introducing sort of scale, introducing 4Ps, and kind of in some ways ripping up everything that you've previously taught for 2 years and reintroducing them to a much better way of thinking, which they always enjoy. Actually, the feedback after the first term in IB is always, God, this is so much better than IGCSE in terms of content, in terms of the methods of teaching, and in terms of the relevance actually to a lot of the students. It still amazes me. I have students that opt to do IB after IGCSE because it's have to work particularly hard to make that course relevant to the students. Paper 2 skills, I think, is very good. I think what Rich was saying before, the paper 2 map skills, photo skills, graph interpretation skills, that is valuable. And as we know, every year in paper 1, one of the option questions are going to be sort of structured around some sort of map task. Forget what it was last year, possibly option G, I think, on the May exams had some sort of mapping task in there. I'm not sure for the November series, but again, that's probably one of the kind of key values if they've been through IGCSE, they can take those. One more thing to link it to infographics is that I make use of services like Piktochart a huge amount when we're looking at population and particularly settlement, and getting students to produce their own infographics. I'll share some examples of those. to show things like, obviously things like China's one-child policy or youthful populations in Uganda. And it gets them to start to manipulate data and show it in effective ways, which ultimately I think we come back to in grade 11 and grade 12. So there's some sort of good opportunity, I think, to get infographics and to get students producing infographics for one of their up to 40 case studies, which they're meant to remember in the lead up to their May exams, although that wasn't the case this year. So again, I'll put a summary of all of that to answer Kylie's question with all the links on the resources page that we put together after we've done this evening's webinar. But yeah, and again, if you've got any questions to do with sort of IGCSE, as I say, I don't teach NYP, so it's not my speciality, but particularly IGCSE or links or techniques or resources that on my other website, which is just called Geography Pods, there is a kind of a scheme of work for IGCSE, which I'm updating at the moment. But yes, it's not an easy one in terms of transition between those two. Anyway, on that very positive note, I'll hand back to Rich and just see if there's anything else we need to talk through.
No, that's about it. That's all we had planned, really. I hope people have found it useful. It's nice to come together. It's nice to see everybody from all parts of the world. We'll stick all the links and everything on Geography All the Way and Geography Pods over the next some point today or tomorrow. We're going to try and do this every 3 weeks on a different sort of theme and things. And the next one, we're going to have to actually skew it around a bit. The next one at this time of the day is going to be on Tuesday, the 19th of May. We're actually going to do the 8 p.m. one on a Monday and the 11 o'clock one, 11 a.m. one on the following Tuesday. Just because we need to. So that's the plan. So 3 weeks time. We haven't really settled on a theme for that one yet. So please, if you've got any suggestions, do drop us a contact on Facebook or something like that. But other than that, I'm going to go and have a cup of coffee and put my feet up. Probably get requests to do a nappy change. And I guess, Matt, you better jump into one of your lessons.
Yeah, I've got 20 grade 9s already sending me messages saying, what do we do today? Despite it all being on managed back, it's the same old story every week.
Very much.
Okay, guys.
Thanks very much, gentlemen.
See you soon. Take care.
See you soon. Take it easy.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much. Bye.